Good afternoon, everyone. With a bit of a delay, we shall start this webinar, the first webinar in a series that we at CAS Rule of Law Program Southeast Europe intend to help. Why is that? Well, I'm greeting you from my home office in Bucharest, not from the office. Thank you everyone for joining. On relatively short notice, we gathered 3 experts from 3 different Southeast European countries who are with me online now and hopefully can be seen on the Facebook stream that we just switched on. So while we usually at CAS hold seminars in a variety of cities in the region and conferences, it is not possible at the moment for obvious reason. So we stay at home, or in Romanian stem acasă. So anyway, the world goes on, and in particular there's a variety of legal questions that we think deserve to be answered, or at least to be discussed, and we want to contribute to the discussion with this series of online discussions. Legal questions such as how do different states deal with the so-called curfew breakers? Albania currently is talking about introducing prison sentences of up to 15 years. I'm happy to have in the group an Albanian expert with us. I will introduce all of them to you in a bit. Other questions would be, is the supervision of people infected by coronavirus by state through tracking apps allowed, or should it be allowed? And it's not only Singapore. North Macedonia currently has a private app that is being used on a voluntary basis so far. So the legal questions are very close to us. Also, is it okay that certain fundamental freedoms cannot be fully exercised? And till when should this state of emergency last? Who shall decide? How should the justice system function in times of pandemics? And basic questions. Should you be allowed to go out for a pizza to your favorite pizza place next week again? Well, that is too many questions already for this first webinar. So don't worry, we will be trying to host one on a weekly basis. And let me now switch and introducing 3 interesting experts from different countries who have been already online with us for half an hour and who will be talking with me and to you in a bit. So we will be going strictly by alphabetic order, first names. So first, let me welcome Adnan Kadribasic, who's online in Sarajevo, Bosnia and Herzegovina. Adnan is legal consultant at Lucid Links, and he is also for more than 10 years already active in the non-governmental organization Pravnik in Sarajevo. Welcome, Adnan. Also, we have Ina Xhepa. Ina is with us from Tirana in Albania. She is director of an NGO called European Centar of Albania. Ina is also teaching at Tirana State University as a lawyer. And last but certainly not least, we have Milena Bešić joining. Milena is in Podgorica, Montenegro. She is director of CEDEM, the Center for Democracy and Human Rights, for more than 3 years already. Hi, Milena. CEDEM is implementing a variety of projects on rule of law, media relations, and other topics. Well, I hope the next half an hour or so we will have a stable connection, and I would like, after this truly brief introduction, to raise the first questions that we think deserve to be discussed. We have prepared some rather general questions, and I think it is relevant and interesting for all of us to hear to what extent this epidemic actually affects the justice system in your countries. And maybe, Adnan, you can start by telling us how's the situation in Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Well, the state of emergency, as it was introduced in Bosnia approximately a month ago, has influenced every sphere of our lives. To some extent, we were a bit more prepared than you would normally expect from a country, from an emergent democracy, because we had the floods in 2014, which raised up our recovery capacities to some extent. But everything else, every other sector of government was completely shocked when we had to introduce basically the lockdown and all the or the orders to which prevented us to to meet and introduce the social distancing measures. And this also has influenced to a large extent our judiciary, which did not and still does not have any capacities to run their ordinary work in these circumstances. Our institutional independent regulator, the High Judicial and Procedural Council, to some extent did already have some video conferencing capacities, and they have been running meetings trying to deal and to instruct the judiciary how to operate in these times of crisis. But we still don't have a regulatory framework which says what and how our judiciary can and should adapt. Moreover, the measures which were introduced by the governments say that all those that don't have to do anything from their office should be sent. And in some parts of the government even asked to use parts of their annual leaves. And this is an option that most of the judges and prosecutors did in our country and are using. But now we are entering the second month. The deadlines, the statute of limitations are going to enter into effect. And we are slowly thinking about how to approach delivering justice in the future. One of the attempts is the adoption of the so-called coronavirus, which is trying to deal and define how the deadlines within the judiciary, including debts and everything else, and all the interest rates that are associated to that, are going to be postponed, delayed, or extended. But this is something that is still being debated. The government did adopt a draft of the law. It's now up to the parliament to discuss how this law will take effect and how the judiciary will operate under such circumstances. What we don't know, and what, despite the fact that we could be moderately happy with how we are dealing with our crisis, is the fact that we receive little information from our government, who is currently taking the lead in emergency response, on what other measures could have been implemented, can be implemented in order to overcome or find a way how to operate in these circumstances. The decision making is far from being transparent. And we are still trying to get information even on the impact of such measures. I think that this could be just a short introduction. I think that there could be a follow-up question that we can discuss more about this.
All right, thanks Adnan. Maybe then we take the same question and directly go to Ina. How is it in Albania?
In Albania, the government started to take measures on March 9th, and we are in this situation for more than 1 month and a half, more or less. Since 10th March, the High Council of Judiciary suspended every juridical process and all the court sessions and hearings. They made only the one exception, which are urgent cases, like criminal cases for which people are staying in detention, and they shall be evaluated within 72 hours. But the High Council of Judiciary postponed this measure again until the 22nd of April, and now they are all courts in Albania are dealing only with these criminal cases and with cases which the judge themselves can they evaluate as urgent, like domestic violence or so on, or execution cases. For example, when parents has to pay their monthly contribution for their children, and they are not paying, the court can assess even these cases. But the entire juridical situation is suspended, and time limits are suspended. Likewise, the European Court of Human Rights suspended the 6-month time limit. Even Albanian court, the High Council of Judiciary, decided that all running time limits are suspended until next announcement.
Okay. I repeat the question. To what extent, Milena, has the epidemic affected the justice system of Montenegro? Please share with us.
First of all, I have to introduce you and the public who is following us that the situation in Montenegro is a little bit different by the fact that our state is not proclaimed the emergency situation. So we are having theoretically different measures, and it's not usual acting in the state, but the official proclamation of emergency situation didn't happen because we have another law which is, let's say, prescribing possibility of this, and this is why our government, according to the law on protection of population from diseases, established a certain body. The name of this body is the National Coordination Body for Protection of Diseases, and this body is, let's say, proclaiming measures. At the moment, Parliament should function, judiciary system should function, so it's not emergency situation. Of course, all these bodies are functioning under a different regime. So our judicial system is, for example, on hold for hearings because these measures are proclaiming that it shouldn't be in the same room more than a few people, and of course that all other like occasions where we should have more people are, let's say, forbidden. And but the only court which works like before pandemic is offense courts. They are continuing their work, and they are only estimating the number of people that could be in the same time in the courtroom. Of course, I see that this is similar in Albania, while the basic courts, commercial court, administrative court, their scheduled hearings are postponed, and except, of course, urgent cases. What are the urgent cases? The councils of courts are deciding on the situation, so these people are, of course, going to work, but and these councils are deciding, or judges are deciding, whether each case is urgent or not. The prosecutor's offices are working. With the exception if the employees are, let's say, COVID positive, or they have medical proof that they shouldn't be working, and then the procedure is usual how to deal with it. Except that the courts and judicial system is working like that. Regarding, maybe it's not the now moment to talk about parliament and other institutions, because we talk about judiciary system only. Well,
Actually, the second question very much is related to how the parliament works in each of the countries. So why don't we start with the second question with you, Milena? Indeed, okay. How did, if there was changes, how did the decision making actually change in Montenegro? Please let us know.
Yes, so exactly. There are certain, let's say, open debate in our public regarding establishing this body, because because it's not the emergency situations, and this law on protection of population is prescribing possibility or establishing this body. There's another body that already exists, but the scope of the activities that this body is in charge of, it's rather very let's say strict on medical protection and health protection. So another one with wider scope of jurisdictions is established, and that body is functioning as far as I know before the first measures proclaimed. I think end of February or beginning of March. I forgot to say that in Montenegro was the last country in Europe with zero recorded cases, and we had specific measures already before the first registered case. So we can say that we were lucky to be the last one, so we could learn from the experience of other countries and prepare certain measures, and these measures are giving results. On the other hand, concerning, let's say, issues of democracy in the country, let's say, little bit passive role or engagement of parliament is what is concerning me, because even before this COVID situation, we had for several years, actually from the last election, parliamentary election 2016, boycott of parliament for a long period of time. After that, some of opposition political parties get back to the parliament, and let's say functioning of the parliament itself wasn't good even before this. So during this situation, the parliament in regular parliamentary sessions we didn't have. So this week, President of the Parliament announced that the next session will be held next week. But in the meantime, there are parliamentary groups and which are regularly having meetings, consistent of representatives of all parliamentary groups, with exception the ones who are anyway boycotting the parliament. So there are certain let's say proposals from different political parties, clubs in parliament, that they are giving suggestion on certain issues such as solving the economical situation or different types of let's say suggestions. But this is not plenary session of regular plenary session of parliament, and I'm happy to hear that we will have regular parliamentary sessions in the future. And for this period of time, of course, the government is executional with executional role with the Ministry of Health and Institution for Protection of Health, with representatives of different ministries are, let's say, members of this body, who is in charge of regulating the situation. I have to admit that citizens of Montenegro are having a high level of trust in institutions, in specifically this body. Situation was not like that before, in January or December, when our organization in our regular researches measured the level of trust in general institutions. But healthcare system was on a higher position when we measured the trust of institutions, and now it's confirmed even in this situation, where we have that citizens are, let's say, relying on the let's say measures proclaimed in this period of time.
Thank you, Milena. The same question now I would like to raise to Adnan. Bosnia and Herzegovina is a very complex state. Maybe you can elaborate on the functionality of parliaments on different levels in brief.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely are a complex country, and we have unfortunately more parliaments, 14 in total. But the two crucial ones with the responsibility to act in times of emergency are the two entity parliaments. And they, as a result of the fact that we are also an asymmetrical federation, they have different measures in place and different approaches to the crisis, which are based on the different setup of the two constitutions of the two entities. Both have a similar approach and are trying to manage this crisis. And I would say it's definitely hard to assess the impact of how they manage it. But I'm moderately happy with how we are managing the crisis currently. And as I said, the issue with some of the restrictions that were introduced is the fact that there was not too much debate on if these restrictions or if these orders and measures are the most proportionate one and the one that are really necessary. I'll just illustrate this with two examples. Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina has introduced a measure similarly like the RS to ban all movement outside of homes for people that are younger than 18 and older than 65. And this has been very much debated and criticized especially by the human rights community. And even the Human Rights Watch has issued an assessment saying that these measures are completely disproportionate, and that they are also, to a large extent, also decreasing the health outcomes for younger people and for the elderly. RS, on the other hand, has decided to introduce a ban on spreading of false news and news which would criticize the actions of the government and measures of the government in times of crisis, which again was criticized by the High Commissioner for Human Rights, who said that these measures, these times, this crisis should not be used to limit media freedoms. And again, the issue with both measures is the fact that there was no proper debate in the public, and we received little to no information why these measures could be and should be justified. We can only assume what reasons are behind those, but we simply don't have sufficient information. In Federation, what we heard yesterday is that this ban for which basically introduced different treatment on the grounds of age will be assessed by the Constitutional Court next week, and we'll see how. I'm assuming that at that moment the Constitutional Court will be also receiving some more information from the federal government on the reason behind this.
Thank you, Adnan. To complete the picture, Ina, let us know how the Albanian parliament is functioning, or is it not?
Indeed, in Albania, the measure started since the 9 March, and the parliament stopped its sessions in person. But they are all the parliamentary commissions. They are working online, and they are doing all the meetings online. Meanwhile, today was scheduled the first hearing session, which was scheduled online, even this hearing session, because all the acts adopted by the Council of Ministers in line with the state of emergency, health emergency, and all the regulations of the deprivation of rights for Albanian citizens shall be voted by the parliament within a time limit prescribed by the constitution. And this time limit now for some of them is expiring. That's why that the parliament shall vote for this act. Moreover, the Council of Ministers deposed to the Commission for Legal Affairs and Human Rights some amendments of on the criminal code, which you mentioned before, and we shall notice that the majority part of civil society organizations which work on human rights and rule of law made last week a public statement, and we are against these amendments because they can affect fundamental rights of Albanian citizens. And moreover, we are in a situation that we don't have a functional constitutional court which can scrutinize these amendments afterwards if they are in line with the constitution or not. However, the Commission of Legal Affairs changed its approach after all civil society organizations made resistance on the amendments on criminal code. I shall emphasize that during this period they were adopted a lot of regulations, acts, and Council of Minister decisions which change very fast. And it sometimes is difficult to maintain citizens informed of all new regulations in force, adopted within the framework of the state of emergency. However, one of our colleague organizations is monitoring the parliament and monitoring the meeting held by all commissions. And sometimes they said that they reported to the public that these meetings has problems in connections and so on, because now everyone is online, and some state institutions were not prepared to go with smart working.
Maybe a short question to any of you who wants to answer in relation to the functionality of parliament. Has the quorum been changed? Like simple majority is not needed any longer, threshold down to, I don't know, 30%, something like that?
No. Nothing has been changed, because to change it, we shall change the constitution. And the constitution cannot be changed in times of emergency neither. It shall be the emergency, it shall be war in order to change this kind of regulations, but no, the quorum doesn't change, and they are making everything function. They are trying to make everything function online, and for these legal amendments, for example, they need for the amendments of the criminal code, they need 4 vote of 84 members of the parliament. So.
Okay.
Out of 140.
This extra question, Adnan, Milena, any news from you on this regard?
No, because as I said, we don't have this emergency state. The bigger decisions, nothing bigger changed in the work of parliament, not to talk about changing the measures to 2/3 or whatever. So only the president of the parliament often held this collegium of parliament, which serves to discuss and to agree on the required activities during this situation. But I'm happy to repeat, to see that the regular plenary session will happen next week.
Exactly.
Bosnia, what I liked, and what is present, and what is leaders are saying, is that there's some level of solidarity. And they are happy to support almost every action of the position, unless it goes way off of what they anticipate is going outside of the right direction. But we are just about to have the sessions of one of the parliaments in the country, which will be discussing the so-called Coronavirus Act, which will deal with all these measures to compensate for the the losses of workers, businesses, etc. And at the same time, the new law on the budget, which will basically accommodate these new spending. So we'll see how they'll act. To date, there's not too much on either opposition or even a discussion that rules needs to be changed. Somehow, there is really a good level of solidarity among key political elites in the country around measures taken.
Thank you, Adnan. Well, we've talked about the justice system, the parliament. I would like to briefly also ask a question about the media situation and freedom of expression, followed by another question then how the reaction by the population looks like. But let's briefly have a look at how does the freedom of expression and access to information is affected currently. Anybody would like to start? If not, we go by alphabet again. Then
Yeah.
I mean, I started already. I mean, the freedom to receive, the right to receive information is definitely a much more limited. I mean, the news are full of all the measures and all the developments in the country. And what one of my colleagues pointed out, unfortunately, what we don't have in the country is centralized information even on the number of new cases. So you have a dispersion of data coming in from throughout the day. I mean, there's a website and it will inform you, but we are all overwhelmed with data on crisis and the measures and the cases. On the same side, we don't have enough information. We don't receive enough information on policies. I don't know. We recently, last week or was this week, I don't know, we decided to take a new debt or new loan from the IMF. And there was a huge discussion whether how they will distribute the funds between the different layers of government. But nobody talked about the terms of the loan and what will the purpose of the funds, what the purpose of the funds will be. Either are we using it for to basically to fill in the deficit in our budgets, or for proactive measures to compensate for the crisis. So there's too little information on the policies taken, and media are just an intermediary, and they are basically not even reporting or questioning the policies taken by the decision makers.
Voila. Ina, can you tell us about freedom of expression and information?
In general, yeah. Thank you. In general, the media coverage was professional and positive, even though they tried to cover everything and all the situation, even though now the institutions are more closed and more hermetic. I was consulting some minutes before the list of Council of Europe member states who applied for a derogation of rights under Article 15 of the European Convention of Human Rights, and Albania sent this derogation request only on the 1st of April. Meanwhile, the situation started on the 9th of March, or almost a month in delay. They send the derogation of rights which freedom of expression and information rights is included in this derogation. And now the state institutions are more hermetic, and they give you more than before, and they give you only some information that they want, and they don't reply for others, even though the situation is not black, and we have some gray in it. For instance, the Ministry of Justice is working online professionally, and they are replying to information requests very quickly. Meanwhile, some other institutions are more hermetic, and they do not give information. I'm mentioning this situation because we are trying, as an NGO in Albania, we are trying to be informed even with some budgetary changes that this COVID emergency situation caused, and the government change the budget, and how these changes will affect various human rights of various vulnerable groups in Albania, such as pro bono legal aid or the situation in prisons and so on.
Thanks for the quick overview. Milena, the same question to you, although of course everybody already has understood that Montenegro is an exception at the moment, so to speak, since you're luckily not as much affected as many other countries. However, are there any discussions going on around this?
Yes, of course. Being in the position that we don't have so many cases, it's not understood in the broader public that we should relax, because really the government is giving, let's say, pointing that out all the time, that we shouldn't relax, because the situation could be worse if we are not, let's say, respecting the measures. But when it comes to communication with public, there are two different sides of one medal. The positive, I will start with the positive one, is that from the beginning, this national body is communicating with the public on daily basis. Actually, since 2 weeks, I believe that there are 2 press conferences per day, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, giving the new facts, new informations, and also answering on the questions of journalists. So they're receiving questions of journalists via Twitter or other platforms or emails, and they are answering live. So all TV stations has rights to broadcast these sessions. Usually the people who are answering on the questions are representatives of this national body, and also representatives, so there are representatives, one representative from healthcare system and another from the government. It's usually like that, and if there are open issues unsolved that they are trying to, let's say, answer in some next session. For example, I will give one example. I mentioned there, it wasn't clear from the beginning how this national body was established. So yesterday, they on the website of the government, there were a huge explanation how this body was, according to which law and which article, and how it was. Still, there is open debate about that, but it is ongoing and it's public debate. So opposition parties are claiming differently. There are NGOs who are giving their, let's say, view on the situation. So at least if there is some controversies, it's, let's say, covered in public. On the other side, media are reporting really professionally. We are very happy to see that there is no fake news, that there is no misuse of situation for some political, let's say, messages. If they are really on the low level, at least produced by media. I'm not saying if the political actors are using the situation, but really the media are professional and reporting very responsible, taking care of all the measures. They are exposed in risk for their health, but they are really taking care of all measures when they are doing their job. On the other side, also, we have to say that what concerns Montenegrin media, but of course on the let's say internet platforms like social networks, there are a lot of fake news and informations coming from portals from the region or worldwide, which are misleading, and the way that government is treating the violation in this field is not something which should be acceptable in terms of freedom of speech. There were cases, for example, where one user of Facebook or citizen of Montenegro just, let's say, shared information from one tabloid from Serbia, and he was, let's say, arrested for interrogation. So this shouldn't happen because he didn't produce the misleading information. He was not the producer, he just shared. So we cannot now take into consideration the level of media literacy of each citizen and what was his intention. He simply shared information produced somewhere else. On the other side, yes, NGOs and civil society is, of course, giving their opinion about these kind of cases. On the other side, journalists are not, let's say, forbidden to report or anything else. Also, what is very specific for Montenegro, I'm sorry if I'm too long, but this is very makes the situation different, is also freedom, right for on protection of privacy, because there's a list of citizens of Montenegro, or a list of people who are, let's say, in self-quarantine or isolation, actually, self-isolation. So these people are not patients, they're only in risk, so they're in self-isolation. This body made the measure in terms of with goal to let's say protect those people from breaking this rule, so going out. And it's really problematic, and I think this will find an epilogue in some court after this situation ends. And also more problematic was the case of patients, actually, people who were positive on coronavirus, and this list was also in public 2 weeks ago. But the government made some measures and arrested the person from healthcare system who published this. But it's not still clear. He didn't publish it in public. He sent it to colleagues, and now this should be really the case for courts, and prosecution in courts. But at the moment, they at least admitted that it's not allowed to go publicly with lists of people who are infected. And we will see how it will end. So these are, let's say, more or less, the main issues concerning freedom of speech or freedom of media.
Well, as I said, with my list of questions in the beginning, there will be loads of legal analysis and actually more serious. Yes, absolutely. The big question is proportionality. What is appropriate and was not, as you just, and thank you for bringing in some recent cases, with the case of the gentleman sharing a Facebook or resharing a Facebook post and then being arrested. That leads us to the last question on my list. And although we already have exhausted half an hour, I think I would be happy if you can stay some 5 or 10 minutes longer to actually take that last questions. It is related to the reaction of the population. And I would like to start with Ina this time. Ina, it's not by accident that I quoted this recent change of the criminal code of Albania with the prison sentences of up to 15 years, if I understand correctly. What was the trigger? Were there so many curfew breakers, or where does it come from? How was the reaction of the Albanian people in general?
Thank you for the question, Hartmut. Indeed, you mentioned before the proposal of the Albanian government to change the criminal code, and I don't think so that this proposal will be amended, or at least will be enforced after a revision by the Constitutional Court. However, the majority part of Albanian citizens tried at the beginning, no, but afterwards, after they were more aware of the situation and on coronavirus and so on, they tried to obey to the measures taken by the government, and to restrict their movement within the time limits set by the government, which can, in the beginning, we had the opportunity to go out more freely, but now afterwards the government limited time until, for example, until 6 o'clock in the afternoon, and last week were the major limitations, like we were able to move from 5 a.m. to 1 p.m. after midday, and this strict time limit made that all the roads or grocery shops were crowded. Meanwhile, this week, that the government decided to change the time limit of the free movement of people, and from this free movement they excluded all the people who are retired and are in pension now. We are allowed to move until 5:30 p.m. So these time limits cause like a violation of people's fundamental rights, and even though Albanian citizens showed psychological reaction with these measures, because even though they didn't have something to do outside, they created a situation to buy or to do something, because it's very psychological. If they say to you that you can move until 1 a.m., you will find something to go out. And the government posed a measure which you shall stay outside only 60 minutes. But this was not for people who are working in offices or in bank system or in factories, production, and so on. They have permission to go out if their CEO made some kind of authorization. This restriction of freedom of movement, citizens tried to obey with it, but even though it was a bit difficult, because some people, they live alone or they do not have relatives, all their relatives are abroad, and this caused problems. Moreover, some other peoples are working in the black market, and they do not possess so much money in order to stay calm and safe at their home, because they need to go outside to make something, to earn something, to live. Even though the majority part of all economic environment, shops and so on, are all closed, people tried some way to obey, but however, they were even some citizens that didn't obey, and the government and the police made was severe with fines and so on for all the people who move without permission, without registration in this e-government system, or for all the people who ride their cars without permission, because even go outside with a car, you shall be registered.
All right, thank you for the overview. I would like to, yes?
Excuse me,
yes.
Last but not least, according to proportionality, on my opinion as human rights lawyer, normally in these emergency times, the state has a greatest margin of appreciation. However, maybe even the government understood that these limitations made the previous weeks were not really successful, because this week they are seeing that people don't go outside because they are more free. And according to the proportionality, I think that somehow they violate the principle of proportionality, because I understand that there shall be measures, but this measure shall not affect all the rights and even the psychology of the citizens, because we are in time of emergency.
Thank you, Ina. I will come back to part of what you said in the question that has been posted on Facebook, but let us finish the round of answers to the reaction of the population. And Milena, back to you. I mean, you already started giving us some examples, people sharing on Facebook, a doctor sharing names, etc., etc. Anything in addition to these individual cases that you would like to share?
It wasn't doctor, it was IT person in healthcare system, just to be, because if someone
thank you.
Following, to be precise. On the other side, we could read one public opinion research held at the beginning of, or end of March or beginning of April, where we could see it was CATI phone anketeering method, and response, it was another agency, not CEDEM. The response of citizens on this question, how it was mostly like 97% of population think that these measures are adequate. So only 20% of them said, 20% said mostly adequate, but 76% or something people believe that they are adequate. On the other side, it reflects the situation that most of the population, what is like obvious, it's respecting the measures, meaning that we don't have actually, we don't have proclaimed curfew. So we have restrictions in movement. It seemed like, but it's not, because for example, it's a prohibition of movement from 7 p.m. until 5 a.m. next day. And during the weekends, it's a little bit longer, in Saturday until 1 p.m. it's allowed, and in Sundays until 11 o'clock. All the time during the working time, of course, that people who are working, exception of these restrictions are people who are working in healthcare system, Red Cross system, electricity supplying markets, food supplying industry, agriculture as well. So who stays at home, people who can work from home actually. And that's why most of the people are respecting, because they don't feel repressed in that way. Also, there's prohibition of movement between municipalities in Montenegro. And when they're if only for workers, and if these workers are coming from another city to another city in order to work, they should have some kind of proof from the employer to the employee to employer that they are working actually in that part of industry. And we don't have the age distinction, so it reflects it's for all citizens, doesn't matter how old are they. Only for children under 11, they shouldn't be alone on the street, only with one parent. And also people with disabilities and children with disabilities should have one person taking care of them, with them on the street. So these are some rules which applied like gradually, depending how the number of cases was growing. So measures were more and more strict, but we see that they are giving results. We had one municipality, small municipality in city of Podgorica, municipality of Tuzi. At the beginning, the number of cases at the beginning, when total number was like 60, half of them was from that municipality, because one family gathering at the real beginning caused this large number, and then they closed completely this municipality. This case showed that the number didn't raise. So these measures gave results, which proved the public that if you're really respecting the measures, it will give results. So I think these examples proved to broader public that we should all be responsible. Again, there's another side of the story, of course, because there is no proclaimed officially emergency situation. Some temporary measure without proclaiming the state of emergency shouldn't cause the sentence of imprisonment, for example, for breaking these rules, because the power of these rules shouldn't be higher than the criminal code law. So, but there are cases when someone is breaking these measures. That is, for example, freedom of the prohibition of movement after 7 p.m. People were arrested, and the courts decided whether to be imprisoned or to pay a certain amount. So I believe that here we will have cases for maybe higher instances of judicial system or courts, or we will see how it will develop, but we don't have large number of these cases. So it's altogether few people for this 1 month, or so the extent of breaking these rules is very low.
Right, thank you for the insight. Milena, the last to answer my last question would be Adnan, and then we have a list of questions on Facebook. I will just tick one and ask all of you maybe in a minute or two to try to answer that. I know it's basically impossible, but as I said, it's just the start of a discussion, and certainly different countries, different views, and we hope to continue the discussion. Adnan, the reaction in Bosnia and Herzegovina, is there a difference in, say, people in Sarajevo reacting and somewhere in the countryside? Do you have any reports about that?
Well, to some extent, I mean, with this curfew and with these restriction movements, it's much easier to live outside of the urban centers, because at least you have a yard and you can go outside in your own private yard. If you are stuck in an apartment in a city center, then with kids, then it becomes really stressful. Kids have been banned from going out for almost 3 weeks now. Before that, there were only a general restriction, general curfew, and general measure recommendations to keep your social distance, which was not that much followed. And we saw in media and social media pictures of playgrounds full of children and their parents while behaving normally. With this curfew, this has changed. I mean, we were definitely in the beginning, we were all a bit shocked with the situation when the shock started to go a bit down. Then people started to feel more relaxed. They started to feel the normal in this current situation. However, now we're entering the 2nd month and we have the restrictions in place. You see much more people obeying these rules, even though the curfew breakers are approximately a couple of hundreds each evening. You'll see people that are fined or just warned for breaking the curfew. And there's regular reports on how many. I don't know, in Sarajevo there were 87 last night. But it's also could be potentially a reason that the people are not informed fully. I mean, they can have a certificate from their employer that they need to work the 3rd shift if needed. I'm assuming that there's some confusion, but generally speaking, the public is obeying the current rules. And as Milena said, there are some results. I mean, we see that we are controlling and we are managing the spread of the virus, and it's running wild. And I think that I'm sure there are some public perceptions on the measures. I would say that most people support them.
And these perceptions may change over time. Yeah, we're looking ahead into probably another few weeks of these emergency of this situation. Listen, I'm a bad timekeeper. I'm being frank. So I said 35 minutes. We're already here listening to you for an hour. It's very interesting. Nevertheless, also not to disappoint people who posted on Facebook, let me choose one quick question that is not easy to answer. I say it right away. Apparently, Facebook user from Northern Macedonia asks, there is an ongoing discussion among the Macedonian academic community if curfew is violating of human rights and limiting freedoms. What is your stand on that? individual rights and freedom versus public health. Now, in the interest of time, I know, I mean, this is impossible. You can write PhD thesis on that, but maybe just 2 or 3 thoughts comprised in 3 minutes each, and then I would like to finish this discussion and then hope to continue, hopefully, very soon offline with all of you. But who would like to start? I read out the question again. Ongoing discussion among Macedonian academic community if curfew is violating human rights and limiting one's freedoms. What is your stand on that? Individual rights and freedom versus public health. Who would like to start? Ina.
Yeah, I can start, but normally now this divergency between respect on human rights and fundamental freedoms versus respect and taking care of the public health. But to reply to our Macedonian followers, the followers from North Macedonia, we can emphasize that Macedonia lodged to the request to the European Court of Human Rights only on the 2nd of April to derogate the rights. And indeed, even prescribed by the international public law, some fundamental rights can be restricted during emergency times. But these restrictions shall not affect the absolute rights, like the right of life or the right not to be punished without law, etc. These rights cannot be restricted within the framework of the rule of law and within the framework of the respectation of human rights and fundamental laws. Normally is a conflict now, but as far as this conflict will be temporary between fundamental rights and the need to maintain public health, there won't be a problem. But all the situations happened before that North Macedonia, Albania, or other Council of Europe member states, all the restriction on human rights made back then, before this request is lodged to the European Court of Human Rights, may cause cases in national domestic courts or in Strasbourg. Because to some people, maybe their fundamental rights were violated, they were sent to prison or so on, or before a court. And as far as this derogation were not in place, the state shall be responsible if their rights were violated.
Maybe since that was not a country-specific question, I just asked our 2 other experts whether you would like to add something or you have an additional thought. Yeah.
I think that we will all agree with Ina. Because I'm not a lawyer, so I will try to be a philosopher and to say if that the right on life should be at the first place, of course, because if my right, for example, my right for free movement is making the risk for health and life of other person, of course that's easy to choose and to compare. So as long as the other rights of other people are not affected by our behavior, of course that we should have and respect human rights. But this is not just by chance called emergency situation. And the emergency situation is the only exception from this, and in the fundamental rights also of human rights is always also prescribed that there are certain exceptions, and this is one of them. But of course any misuse of this shouldn't happen. So we should take care and rely of course always the rule of law and the level of democracy in each country where this shouldn't be violated, and to take care of the right measure and to proportionality, of course. So it depends from country to country. but of course, it's clear what should be.
Thank you. Thank
only,
you.
Only the extent is something what is always questionable.
Yeah. Thank you, Milena. Adnan, would you have some concluding thoughts on that particular question? And
I mean, I already started to talk about this. I mean, in the Bosnian context and in the context of people between 18 and 65, the curfew that is currently in place with all the exceptions that are possible, I would say it's quite proportionate and is meeting its aim. It was I would say that is even with the information we have was necessary at this moment. For the people that are younger than 18 and older than 65, I really cannot say how if it's proportionate. There are already discussions around this. We will have a constitutional court decision next week, and to my personal legal opinion is that it will fail the proportionality test. There are different arguments pro and contra, but I would say that it's most probably will fail the test, especially because the similar measure was not taken in other parts of the country where kids can, along with their parents, move freely and while keeping their social distance. So we'll see. It's an ongoing debate, but to some extent, I say like there's one part of the measure which I think is proportionate, and the other which most probably isn't.
And one last remark: if you see Council of Europe page, you see that only ex-communist countries made this derogation request, because other countries like Western countries, they shut down everything, but they didn't prohibit citizens to go out in time limits like in our Western Balkan or Eastern countries. I was just consulting the list for curiosity, and all the countries except Latvia are from Eastern Europe. Even Latvia is a previous communist, was a previous communist regime, so maybe this tells something.
Yeah, thank you for highlighting. In fact, very interesting discussion. There's more questions that I will not take now. Also, a big thank you to you three, Milena, Ina, Adnan. Thank you. It was glad to see you, albeit over the screen. And then also for you and others who may listen. In the interest of time, I did not mention Romania, the country where I'm living, but we have already planned for having a second round of discussion with Romanian experts. End of next week, we have invited a member of the Romanian Superior Council of Magistracy. Let's see whether she comes, can make it. And therefore, I'll be brief now. Hvala, faleminderit. Thank you very much, and hope to see you soon again. Stay healthy.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.